What you're about to hear was never meant to leave private rooms or hushed conversations. This wasn't cleared, filtered, or softened for public ears. And once it's out there, it can't be unheard. Because according to Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York herself, there's a chapter of Meghan Markle's past that was never supposed to surface, not debated, not theorized, not whispered as rumor. A chapter that doesn't begin with Prince Harry, fairy tale weddings, or palace gates. It begins far from cameras, far from accountability, surrounded by open water and luxury silence aboard Prince Andrew's yacht. And this is where everything suddenly feels heavier. Sarah Ferguson didn't just hint. She didn't float vague implications. She alleges something far more dangerous. She claims there are materials still in existence. Private letters never meant to be read by anyone else. Recordings never meant to be heard outside the moment they were spoken. Memories preserved in ways that don't fade or soften with time. Proof that doesn't rely on belief. Proof that simply waits. According to her, Meghan wasn't just nearby, she wasn't a background presence. She wasn't someone who crossed paths by coincidence. She had a role, and the phrase Sarah used to describe that role was so deliberate, so unsettling, that once you hear it, it rewrites everything. She called Meghan Prince Andrew's first client. Let that sink in. Not friend, not guest, not acquaintance, client. If even a fraction of that is true, the story we've been fed about Meghan's rise doesn't just crack, it collapses in on itself. And now Sarah Ferguson is saying she plans to put everything into a tell-all book. Every detail, every secret, every memory she stayed silent about for years. And once you truly understand what that implies, nothing you think you know looks the same again. Because words matter. And that word wasn't chosen casually. When Sarah Ferguson described Meghan Markle as Prince Andrew's first client, it wasn't gossip language. It wasn't romantic phrasing. It wasn't careless. It was calculated. A client doesn't wander into a situation by accident. A client implies arrangement, awareness, expectation, exchange, something understood, even if it was never written down or spoken aloud where others could hear. That single word shatters the idea that Meghan's early proximity to Andrew was innocent or coincidental. It reframes those yacht appearances as purposeful, structured, known. According to Sarah's account, Meghan wasn't simply tagging along to a party, she was noticed, engaged privately, given access that went beyond polite smiles and surface conversation, and this is where the story turns dark. Because if Meghan was Andrew's first client, it suggests the beginning of a pattern, a moment where access, intimacy, and opportunity quietly intersected. And imagine how that would land on Prince Harry, a man who spent years publicly distancing himself from Andrew, a man who rejected everything his uncle represented, a man who drew lines in sand and made his disgust clear. Now imagine finding out that the woman you married, the woman you defended against the world, is being described with language that ties her directly into the same shadow you tried to escape. That's not just uncomfortable, that's destabilizing. Memories can be questioned, motives can be doubted, but physical evidence changes everything. And according to Sarah Ferguson, that's exactly where this crossed into territory that couldn't be brushed aside. She claims she came across letters, private correspondence linking Meghan directly to Andrew's yacht days. Not formal notes, not polite check-ins, but personal messages, familiar, written with the ease of shared history. Details mattered, handwriting mattered, references mattered. These letters, as Sarah describes them, mentioned moments and jokes that only someone who had actually been there would understand. Mentions of areas on the yacht invisible to casual guests. The kind of details you don't fake because you don't even know they exist unless you've lived them. When Sarah read them, she didn't laugh them off. She didn't chalk them up to misunderstanding. She recognized exactly what they represented. Proof that what she remembered hadn't lived only in her mind. For years, those letters stayed hidden, held, weighed, feared, because once paper exists, it doesn't argue back, it doesn't spin, it doesn't apologize, it simply is. And with those letters, the story crossed a line. It moved from someone's recollection to something tangible, something that could be shown. But even letters leave room for denial. Ink can be questioned, pages can be challenged, context can be argued, and that's when voices enter the story. And voices change everything. According to Sarah Ferguson, what finally destroyed the illusion of deniability were recordings, not descriptions, not secondhand retellings, actual audio. Conversations preserved that were never meant to survive the moment they were spoken. She claims these recordings captured private exchanges between Prince Andrew and Meghan Markle during those yacht days. Relaxed voices, familiar tones, unfiltered moments. The way people sound when they believe no one else is listening. This is where there is no turning back. A voice carries identity, rhythm, emotion. It can't be separated from the person it belongs to. And for Prince Harry, the idea that his wife's voice could exist in private conversation with the uncle he despised would have been unbearable. Because once you hear something like that, you don't just hear sound. You hear history rearranging itself. The existence of recordings meant this story was no longer theoretical. It wasn't about belief, it was about recognition. Something that could be played, replayed, identified. And just knowing that those recordings exist is enough to destabilize everything. No one paid a heavier emotional price than Harry. His entire adult identity is built on rejection. Rejection of royal hypocrisy. Rejection of secrecy. Rejection of Andrew himself. He made his stance clear. He drew lines. He walked away. And now now, according to these claims, the past crossed those lines without his consent. Imagine the collision. The woman he fought the world for, the uncle he worked to erase from his life, suddenly connected by a history he never saw coming. This wasn't jealousy, this wasn't ego, this was humiliation layered on top of loyalty. Because Harry didn't just love Meghan, he built his public war around her innocence. He became her shield, and shields crack when they're built on stories that might not be complete. Accounts tied to this fallout say Harry withdrew, pulled inward, swung between anger and disbelief, demanding answers one moment, clinging to denial the next. Because accepting the possibility meant facing something far worse than betrayal. It meant realizing he might not have been the beginning of her story, just the final chapter. Inside the royal family, silence is never accidental. When these claims began circulating in inner circles, there was no loud denial, no firm rebuttal, no official correction, just closed doors, quiet meetings, phone calls that led nowhere publicly. The palace knew the stakes. Andrew's scandals had already scarred the monarchy. Tying Meghan, the woman who challenged the institution openly, directly to Andrew's private world wasn't just embarrassing, it was catastrophic, so silence became strategy. Because acknowledging the story risked validating it, denying it risked provoking proof. And proof, according to Sarah Ferguson, existed in forms the palace couldn't control. Behind the scenes, fear replaced confidence. Not fear of headlines, fear of what else might surface if anyone pulled harder. The monarchy has weathered storms before, but this one threatened to connect too many dark chapters at once, and that's why no one rushed to speak. Sarah Ferguson didn't rush either. She stayed silent for years, but when she finally spoke, she didn't whisper, she didn't hedge. She made a direct claim. Meghan had multiple encounters on Andrew's yachts, and they weren't accidental. If true, this doesn't add a footnote to Meghan's past. It rewrites the opening page entirely. And for Harry, a man who spent his life running from Andrew's shadow, that realization would have been devastating. Because secrets hurt the most when they involve the people you trust with your whole life. The yacht isn't just a backdrop in this story, it's the foundation. According to Sarah, Andrew's yachts were built for privacy above all else, out at sea, away from press, away from witnesses, away from rules. Titles blurred, boundaries softened, accountability disappeared. These weren't casual outings, they were repeated retreats, carefully chosen spaces where powerful people could exist without consequence. Champagne flowed, guards dropped, relationships formed in places no one could see. And according to Sarah Ferguson, Meghan wasn't unfamiliar with this world. She didn't stumble into it once. She returned, she became known. She understood how that floating world worked, and that's why the yacht matters, because it explains access, repetition, and how a future Duchess could exist inside royal shadows long before the public ever learned her name. And once you understand that, the story doesn't slow down, because everything circles back to that phrase, his first client. And the most unsettling part isn't what's already been revealed, it's what hasn't. Somewhere, according to Sarah Ferguson, letters still exist the public has never seen. Recordings still exist the world has never heard. Evidence held back not because it's weak, but because it's too powerful. And drifting at the center of it all is that yacht. Silent, polished, carrying secrets no one thought would matter years later. A place where reputations were unguarded, where intentions were whispered, where history shifted quietly. Prince Harry thought he escaped the past when he left the palace. But the past doesn't respect distance. It waits, it follows, and sometimes it returns with names you never expected to hear spoken together. And if that yacht could speak, this wouldn't be the end. It would only be the beginning. Because ghosts don't disappear just because you walk away from them. They wait quietly, tucked into corners you never think to look at until the moment they decide it's time to be seen. And that's the part no one can escape here. Not Harry, not Meghan, not the palace, not even Sarah Ferguson herself. What makes this story so explosive isn't just what's been said, it's what's being held back. Sarah Ferguson hasn't released the letters, she hasn't played the recordings, and that silence isn't mercy, it's leverage. Because once something like that is made public, there is no reverse. No cleanup, no carefully worded statement that puts the genie back in the bottle. It would live forever. And everyone involved knows it. For Meghan, this isn't about reputation anymore. It's about origin. Because if her story didn't begin where the world was told it did, then every narrative she's built since becomes unstable. Every tearful interview, every declaration of innocence, every moment framed as first contact with royal darkness suddenly looks rehearsed under a different light. Not fabricated, perhaps, but incomplete. And incompleteness is dangerous when you've built an identity on transparency. For Harry, the damage cuts deeper. This isn't tabloid embarrassment, this is existential. His entire sense of self rests on the idea that he broke free, that he chose differently, that he protected the woman he loved from the very corruption he despised. But what if that corruption was already woven into her past? What if the thing he ran from was already standing beside him? That realization doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes trust. And trust, once fractured, doesn't shatter loudly. It splinters quietly, piece by piece, until you're left questioning memories you once held sacred. Was he defending her, or defending a version of her he needed to believe in? And the palace? The palace knows better than anyone that some truths don't need to be spoken to be real. That's why there's no rush to confront this head on. Because confrontation invites exposure, and exposure invites proof. And And proof, according to Sarah Ferguson, exists. So everything remains suspended, unconfirmed, unreleased, hanging in the air like a storm no one wants to acknowledge, but everyone feels coming. The yacht stays silent. The letters stay hidden. The recordings stay locked away. For now. But stories like this don't disappear. They wait for the right moment, the wrong moment, a moment of weakness, a moment of revenge, a moment where silence no longer serves the person holding it. And when that moment comes, it won't just rewrite a chapter. It will force everyone to ask the one question no one wants to answer. What if the beginning was never what we were told at all?